earlier you said about power being very concentrated in Westminster. So what are your thoughts on England becoming devolved?
What I think is, I mean, the England and Wales Green Party that I'm a member of, our Scots went independent in 1990. So, as England and Wales Party, we back Scottish independence because that's what the Scots do.
Mm.
Our Welsh Party is also in favour of exploring and heading towards independence. That leaves England. Um, Excuse me. But what I think is really crucial is that, I mean, I've been championed a lot the idea of a Yorkshire Parliament, a Cornwall Assembly, is we actually need to bring most of the power of decision making much closer to the people. So it's a case
Mm.
of not focusing. You know, I was in Carlisle once talking to some people about what happened in Westminster, and they were kind of like, that's a foreign country, a long, long, long way away. So we need to bring governance back to the people in their communities at a kind of, sort of regional, county, but also, a town council, parish council kind of level.
Right. Obviously, like I've lived in London my entire life, so I only really know about this from like a second-hand point of view, because obviously for me, if I want to go to like the center of power in the country, it's like an hour away on a train. So I agree that there should definitely be more sort of local power, but it's interesting that I can't sort of personally relate to it.
No, I think, but I mean, if you think about, you also, I mean, maybe you're not actually in London, but if you are in London, you've got a London Assembly and a London Mayor
Yeah,
that have quite a lot of day-to-day say over, TfL, Transport for London runs the buses, and London buses, although I'm quite often to be seen on Twitter complaining about them, they're vastly better than most of the rest of the country. And so, if you are in London, you've basically got a quite high level of devolution, as well as the fact that the whole national parliament and government is centred in your territory as well. So no, it probably isn't very evident from London, but if you go to Cornwall, you go to Newcastle, people feel it very acutely. And some figures actually just reported in the Financial Times. Hampshire Council, a very wealthy, leafy part of the country, 93% of their budget is going on children's care and adult social care. Those
right.
are responsibilities mandated, their statutory responsibilities mandated by Westminster. So they've only got 7% of their budget left to actually make decisions about local priorities, which is not very
Hmm.
much.
Yeah, that's slightly concerning. But what's a typical day for you like in the House of Lords? Is there something unexpected about life in the Lords that people might not know?
One of the very strange things about the House of Lords, and we did try to change this, but the traditionalist one, is we start sitting on Mondays and Tuesdays at 2:30 p.m. and on Wednesdays at 3 p.m. So we finish those days generally about 10 p.m. in the evening.
Oh, wow.
So, so people say, "Oh, can you come along to this meeting?" And the answer is almost certainly no, because I have to be in the House. And under the previous government, when we were fighting very hard against things like, for example, the Rwanda bill, now the Rwanda Act, that was going to uh, force refugees out of the UK to Rwanda, never able to come back. Um, we often sat till 1, 2 a.m. in the morning. I gave one of my big thundering speeches against the Rwanda bill at about 1:20 a.m., which is,
That's
I've got
horrendous.
a hashtag, no way to run a country. And I could use it pretty well on every tweet that I put out all of the time. We don't have a modern, functional democratic constitution, and we urgently need one.
Mm. That's not right that you guys should be working that late. Like, that's not right at all.
No, and I mean, it doesn't mean that we actually start work then, because before that, there's all sorts of all-party parliamentary group meetings. I might have a breakfast meeting, say, with the National Trust. Various organisations want to talk to us, find out what we're thinking about, ask us to do things for them, ask us to put written questions down for them. So, it basically means I, normally start at about 9 and finish at 10 if I'm lucky. So, hashtag no way
Mm.
to run a country.
No, it's not. Given your background in journalism, do you ever miss writing full time? Like, do you still find ways to sort of scratch that writing itch?
Oh, well, this will give me a chance to advertise my Change Everything Substack. So on weekends, I try and give a couple of hours to writing interesting things that I'm on the sort of intersection of science and history, etc. And of course, every speech you give is essentially a work of writing. I haven't necessarily always written it down first, but the composing it orally is that. So, I could not in any way say that I have any shortage of opportunities to express myself.
You've worked across Australia and the UK. Are there any particular Australian phrases or sayings that still slip out in conversation?
This is a really good question that no one's asked me before. And yes, I do. I mean, occasionally Australian English is not that different from British English, but there are a few words. I do notice that when I make my TikTok videos, I'm one of the few members of the House of Lords with a TikTok account. They always think when they do the transcription that I said gonna instead of going to,
Right.
which is clearly the Australianness coming out. And I also always have to think about in Australia, we call what you call the silencer on a car a muffler.
Right.
And I always have to think in my head, now hang on, which is the Australian one and which is the British one? So there's a few words like that. And a few words like I did once actually in my journalism days the word yobs, which means kind of young, usually young people who were sort of behaving rather loutishly. And I said this, and everyone in the office just looked really blank. So I still occasionally come across words like that.
If you could design one law that would be guaranteed to pass tomorrow, what would it be and why?
Oh, a law that would be guaranteed to pass. Well, the law that I would like to institute would be to bring in a universal basic income. I mean,
Right.
again, mentioning book, the first chapter of Change Everything is about universal basic income, because what it would essentially do is free up human possibility, human creativity. Most of us these days, for most of our lives, it's a boss who decides how we spend our time, energy, and talents. In the old Soviet system, it was the state that decided how we spend our time, energy, and talents. Universal basic income would mean people could decide for themselves how to spend their time, energy, and talents. And it's interesting that this is long-term time Green Party policy, but over the last 10 years, it's really leapt up the agenda. There's a very large and growing campaign movement, the UBI Labs movement. Lots of people are campaigning, for example, for universal basic income for farmers,
Right.
which would be a way to start to secure our food supply. So I would say, the thing I would like to do is a UBI. Lots of people still have trouble with the idea, so something that I would be guaranteed to pass is what I'd really like to do is, and in fact, this reflects what I think it's Sean Berry, the Green MP, has just put down a private member's bill in the other place, as we call the Commons. Let's ban pesticide use in urban areas, because we are spraying these poisons, we are knocking out biodiversity wholly unnecessarily in urban areas. So, except for when there's a real special argument for use, Japanese knotweed may be an exception, but let's stop routine spraying of pesticides in urban areas. That's a One Health policy for human health, for environmental health, for the well-being of all of us.
Finally, in an ideal world, what would the UK look like in 20 years if we truly embraced green policies across all sectors?
Well, in 20 years' time, we've probably had for at least a decade a 4-day working week as standard with no loss of pay, and we're heading towards a 3-day working week as standard with no loss of pay. That means people have far more time in their life to do with it what they will, to contribute to society, to spend times with friends and family, to spend times with hobbies, reading, creating, doing all kinds of things for themselves. You might think I talk a lot about technology, about solar panels and a small number of electric cars, lots more electric buses, and lots of walking and cycling. All of those things are necessary, but what I'm really focused on is the social innovation of creating a society where people have the potential to use their time, energy, and talents well, rather than as so many people now are forced into what the late great David Graeber called bullshit jobs. So we have in 20 years' time a society that, of course, has the technological background of low carbon technologies, but much more to be society where nobody was struggling to put food on the table, keep a roof over their head. a society where there were no food banks because there was no need, no demand for food banks. With a universal basic income, people would have the security of knowing that their life is secure and they can build from that, choose how to live their life from that basis of security. And of course, everyone having a warm, comfortable, secure home, and us having stopped treating homes primarily as financial assets and regarded them as people living securely, comfortably in the right size home with enough bedrooms for everybody. So this is a society that's working for people and for planet. And it's one of the things people sometimes say, oh, we can't afford all these environmental things. Well,
But we can. We just need to sort of direct money to the right areas.
We've been trashing the planet and creating a thoroughly miserable society. We can actually create a much better society for people living within planetary boundaries. There's enough resources on this planet for everyone to have a decent life, for us to look after climate and nature if we share them out fairly.
Well, I mean, that's a good way to finish up. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast, Natalie. It's been amazing.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed our discussion. All the best, and I look forward to listening to some of your future guests.
Thank you. Listeners, join us next week when I'll be speaking to Lucy Rigby MP.